I'm Cora, 31 years old, a veterinary nurse technician at an emergency animal hospital in Phoenix, Arizona. I make about $62,000 a year. Not a fortune, but enough to live on if you know how to stay away from temptations like Starbucks and end-of-season clearance racks. I started my journey to buy a house when I had just turned 21. While my friends poured money into travel, fancy weddings, or whatever adulting thing they thought they needed, I lived like a college freshman, bulk ramen, thrift store clothes, and a 2002 Toyota Corolla that rattled like I was gambling with fate every time I turned the key. The apartment I rented was about the size of someone else's living room, and I shared it with two roommates, one culinary student, the other a night shift waitress. We had an unspoken rule. Whoever woke up last had to kill the roaches. I always got up early. Every shift at the hospital was a battlefield. Dogs swallowing bones, cats with foreign objects stuck inside, rabbits reacting badly to anesthesia, and pet owners panicking 3 times more than their animals. One time, I had to stop a pit bull from bleeding out after a car accident while the surgeon was stuck in traffic. I handled it. And I loved the job. But in exchange, I had no holidays, no vacations, no real birthday parties. Every extra hour worked went into a savings account I named Cora's House. I didn't spend on myself. I didn't rack up credit card debt. I didn't even have Netflix until I turned 28. Then there's my sister. Shelby, 34 years old, 3 kids by 3 different men, never held a job for more than 6 months. She lives like a chaotic mix of a fashion blogger and someone completely dependent on handouts. She calls motherhood a full-time job. But in reality, it's our mom doing the babysitting, while Shelby networks with her pyramid scheme friends. I don't hate Shelby. I just don't get how, in the same family, I had to scrape for every dollar while she always had the newest iPhone, designer bags, and Instagram photos from a Mexico resort every few months. And to be fair, her main sponsor is none other than my dad, Richard. Richard always has a reason for Shelby's spending. When I asked how she could accidentally blow her child's tuition money on clothes, he just laughed. She needs confidence to raise them well. But when I asked him for a small loan for a down payment 3 years ago, he said, "Cora, you need to learn independence." So I did. 10 years, not a single cent from family. I learned to fix plumbing from YouTube, to cook from TikTok, and every time something unexpected happened, like car repairs or wisdom teeth, I handled it without calling anyone. Last month, I bought my first house, a small, flat-roofed, 3-bedroom home on the outskirts of Mesa. It's not fancy, the walls have cracks, the backyard is full of weeds, and the bathroom still has a powder pink toilet from the 1980. But it's mine. I stood in the empty living room the day I got the keys and cried. No one witnessed it, no one clapped, there was no champagne or party, just me, and the quiet victory of a decade's worth of grit. I didn't realize how resilient I was until I finally got it. My first home. Truly mine. Not because someone gave it to me, not because I deserved it more for having kids, but because I worked like every day was my last shot at freedom. I still remember the moment Shelby announced to the whole family that she was going to become the CEO of a revolutionary wellness brand. I was standing in Mom's kitchen chopping onions and nearly cut myself from laughing. According to Shelby, her brand would combine organic detox tea with moonlight healing therapy. I didn't even get the chance to ask how she planned to package moonlight before my father, Richard, nodded like she had just announced a breakthrough cancer vaccine. Bold idea, Shell. I'll help you get started. In our family, "I'll help" meant Richard was pulling out his wallet, and no one opened that wallet faster than he did for Shelby. Within 2 weeks of her bold idea, she had a custom logo, a professionally built website, by someone else, a boho chic photo shoot lineup, and naturally, a trip to Sedona to connect energetically with the universe. I was stunned. Because I knew exactly who was paying for all of it. Richard was still the CFO at a mid-size real estate firm, and my mother, Laura, had taken early retirement from her job as an elementary school teacher. Money wasn't endless, but somehow they had a magical fund that only Shelby had access to. When I was in college, I once needed $400 to register for a required lab course. I called Dad, hoping he'd help. He answered in 5 seconds flat. "Cora, you need to learn how to plan ahead. We can't always bail you out." I ended up charging it to a credit card, paying nearly 20% interest just to graduate on time. Meanwhile, Shelby got $5,000 from him to invest in a dropshipping business for cat grooming brushes. That project lasted 11 days. She announced the market no longer aligned with her energy and pivoted to selling essential oils for activating feminine intuition. I didn't even know intuition came in 25 milliliter glass bottles. While I worked 10 to 12-hour shifts, Shelby continued living at our parents' house. Rent-free, chore-free, dinner-free. Laura, the same woman who used to make me wash dishes 3 times a week as a teen, now willingly played nanny, chauffeuring the kids and helping with Shelby's personal brand photo shoots. Shelby has 3 kids, Olivia, Max, 5, and Willow, 2. 3 kids, 3 last names. I'm not judging, I love those kids. But I couldn't stop wondering, when will Shelby actually take responsibility? And brought it up to Mom once and only once. "I think you're enabling her too much," I said softly, in the kitchen, while Shelby was out with her camera crew and the kids in matching outfits. My mom paused, her face unreadable. "Shelby's not as strong as you, Cora. She needs more support." I went quiet. I understood. But I didn't agree. Strength isn't a privilege, it's a choice. I chose to leave their protection at 18. Not because I wanted to, but because I knew that if I didn't carve out my own path, I'd forever be a side character in the family play where Shelby starred as the lead. Richard never hid his pride in Shelby. Her product shoot photos were framed and displayed in his home office. My honors diploma? Tucked away in a drawer. He always said, "Cora doesn't need praise. She's the quiet one, just gets things done." But I got it. To him, Shelby was the one who needed rescuing. I was just fine. Shelby has legally filed for bankruptcy twice. Both times Richard bailed her out. I've never owed anyone a dime. But to him, Shelby is brave and entrepreneurial. Me? Just safe. When I bought my house, I didn't announce it. No fanfare, no requests for help. I sent a photo of the keys to the family group chat. Shelby replied with a yawning emoji. Richard said nothing for 2 days. Then he texted, "Good job, Cora. If you want, Shelby and the kids can stay with you a few months to get settled." I didn't respond. But at that moment, something became painfully clear. I had just bought a house. And they still wanted me to live like a guest in it. The unfairness in my family didn't start the day Richard suggested I let Shelby and the kids stay for a few months. It had been simmering long before I was old enough to understand what favoritism even meant. But it truly exploded the day I found out about the house in Gilbert. It was a 4-bedroom farmhouse-style home in a gated community with 24/7 security, just 15 minutes from downtown. I only found out by accident. Mom sent me an email by mistake, one that was meant for Shelby. It was an invoice for a master bathroom remodel. Invoice for master bathroom remodel. I froze. I'd never heard Mom mention redoing a bathroom, especially when they were still living in that creaky old house where the heater wheezed every winter. I asked her directly. She was silent for a moment, then admitted, "Well, your dad and I gave Shelby a new house last year, so the kids could have stability." I couldn't speak for nearly a full minute. A new house? In Gilbert? "I thought that was an investment property," I said, though I already knew I was just trying to comfort myself. Mom only sighed. She needed a place of her own to rebuild. That house was worth nearly $880,000. I looked it up on Zillow right after the call. They bought it when the market was low, almost at rock bottom. A few months later, Shelby had her own private pool, a robot lawnmower, and a garage big enough for both an SUV and the pink Jeep she'd just posted on Instagram. Me? I had just replaced the roof on my modest old house using 3 years' worth of savings. I took time off work to paint my own living room because I couldn't afford a contractor. I was still using a dishwasher from another decade that clanked like an ancient washing machine every time it ran. I wasn't angry that she got a house. I was angry that they acted like I didn't exist. No offer, no discussion. They handed Shelby a brand new start without asking for proof of responsibility, growth, or even gratitude. And I, the one who never asked for help, never broke a rule, was only mentioned when someone needed to help the family stabilize. After that, I started paying more attention. The bills under Dad's name were clearly for Shelby, like a $250 a month high-speed internet plan, routine lawn care service in Gilbert, and plane tickets to a female entrepreneur soul retreat in Palm Springs. That entrepreneur hadn't earned a single dollar legally, as far as I could tell. Then it all spiraled when Shelby sold the house. She called it a strategic decision. I called it a textbook Shelby meltdown. She sold the house less than a year after moving in, making close to $90,000 thanks to market growth and upgrades, paid for by my parents. Where did that money go? Part of it funded a branding partnership with a guy named Dustin, a part-time rapper and self-proclaimed global marketing strategist, selling full courses on TikTok. Dustin lived in LA and posted videos about attracting wealth energy by taping cash to the ceiling and meditating beneath it. Shelby put $100,000 into his studio, which turned out to be a rented warehouse in a sketchy neighborhood. The rest? Shelby launched a light healing garden, basically a round tent made of bamboo poles and white fabric, where she hosted meditation workshops and sold $25 celery juice bottles labeled Celestial Flow Elixir. Richard ignored it all. When I asked, he simply chuckled. Shelby hasn't had your luck, but she'll manage, she has vision. I held back a bitter laugh. Vision? That vision had cost the family an entire house and piled on a mountain of quiet debt. I knew what Richard saw in me, the frugal vet tech who stayed afloat. And Shelby? She was the daughter who needed support to grow. But no one seemed willing to face the truth. Shelby wasn't growing. She was just changing the label on each failure. I used to believe that if I stayed quiet, worked hard, and behaved properly, one day they'd see. But now I know, some people only see what they want to believe, even when the truth is right in front of them. It was a Monday afternoon, after an 11-hour shift. I still had cat blood on my scrubs and a migraine pounding behind my eyes from lack of sleep. I had barely stepped inside when the doorbell rang. I thought it was another Amazon misdelivery. But when I opened the door, I froze. Richard and Shelby stood there. Dad was in a crisp white polo, hands in his pockets like he was inspecting a property he'd just bought. Shelby wore a beige maxi dress and oversized sunglasses that covered half her face, matcha in one hand, a phone with a ring light in the other, live streaming. "Oh, Cora, your house is so cute," Shelby cooed, glancing around like she was rating it for Instagram potential. A little dark in tone, but great vibe. I said nothing, just stepped aside, partly out of politeness, partly because I wanted to see what stunt they were pulling this time. Every step Richard took felt like he was mentally appraising my house. He raised an eyebrow at the wall I had painted myself and turned to me. "Cora, we need to talk," he said in that grave, rehearsed tone he always used before dropping a "for the good of the family" bomb. I crossed my arms and leaned against the kitchen counter. "Shelby and the kids are going through a rough patch," he started. "After the whole music studio thing, well, you know. Dustin vanished. Shelby needs a stable place. A quiet place. To start over." "What about the Gilbert house?" I asked, the sarcasm barely hidden. "Oh, right. That became a healing juice camp before being sold off to pay debts. Shelby pouted. You don't have to bring up negative energy, Cora. I'm trying to realign and embrace a fresh path. A fresh path? I raised an eyebrow. Richard cleared his throat. Your mother and I discussed this. This house, it's too big for one person. You're close to the clinic, it'd be easier for you to find a condo. Shelby, on the other hand, has 3 kids. They need space. A real home. You're saying I should give her my house? I asked. Not give, share. For the family, he corrected, voice firm. If you truly care about your nieces and nephew, this is the right thing to do. Shelby stepped forward, hand on my shoulder like we were at an award ceremony. Don't worry, sis. I'll redecorate. Feng shui friendly for the kids. And if you want to crash here for the first few weeks, that's fine too. I brushed her hand off, blood boiling. This is my house. I worked nearly 10 years to buy it. Every dollar came from me, not a cent from anyone in this family. And now you show up asking me to move out so your golden girl can start over for the umpteenth time? Richard's gaze turned cold. Cora, if you don't understand the value of family, maybe you should reconsider your place in the will. Shelby finally looked up from her phone, eyes gleaming despite her angelic tone. You know Mom and Dad always want what's best for both of us. But if you won't help me, at least don't stand in my way. I just want the best for my children. I laughed for the first time during that entire exchange. A dry, humorless sound. I'm the only one here who's never received anything from Mom and Dad. Shelby got a house. She sold it. Then threw 6 figures at fantasy projects. And now she comes here, with what right, to claim mine. Richard stepped closer, voice low and commanding. Think carefully. This is your chance to prove you're part of this family. Don't force me to make a difficult decision. Like cutting me from the will? I shot back. If that will is just a reward for blind obedience, I'd rather be erased from it today. Silence. Shelby had already turned off her live stream. Richard stared at me for a few more seconds, then gave a slow nod. You'll regret how you spoke today. I straightened, walked to the door, and threw it open. Get out of my house. Shelby and Richard left my house that day looking like they'd been personally insulted to the core. But I didn't care. The rage had settled into something colder. A quiet resolve that comes when you've been dismissed long enough to stop seeking approval. I knew this wasn't over. Shelby didn't know how to give up. And Richard? He saw my refusal to comply for the family as betrayal. So, I got ready. Truth is, I had been ready for years, not because I predicted they'd show up demanding my house, but because I'd learned to protect myself ever since I realized I had no one backing me. I called it the Miller Family Survival Plan. Funny name. Dead serious contents. I opened the safe and pulled out a thick, black folder. Pages of documents, bank transfers, social media screenshots, emails, even credit card statements from the time Richard had me manage his account while Mom was in the hospital. Page 1. The Gilbert House. Proof Shelby's name was on the deed, not some family investment like they used to say. The purchase value was $882,000. She sold it 8 months later for $934,000. I had the Zillow listing to prove it. Page 2. Bank transfers Richard had made to Shelby in the past 3 years. Over $390,000, not including cash, kids' tuition, health care, or their Bali retreat. Every figure backed by statements, texts, and Shelby's own brag posts. Blessed to have a generous dad. Page 3. Photos of the Celestial Flow Elixir Light Retreat. I even saved the comments from attendees who accused her of serving tap water while claiming it was imported, Peruvian, mind juice. Page 4. Invoices for Dustin's sound healing studio. The guy who starred with Shelby in a viral invest in art therapy video then disappeared after 2 months. Shelby called it a spiritual trial. I called it fraud. I didn't gather this for revenge. I gathered it because sometimes people need receipts when memory becomes convenient. The next day, I called Richard. No texts, no emails, just a call. He answered on the fourth ring. Voice cold, controlled. Cora? Do you have time to meet today? I asked. This afternoon. Don't bring Shelby. This is between you and me. He hesitated, then agreed. We met at a quiet cafe in Central Scottsdale. I arrived first, picked the table by the window. When he walked in, I pointed to the chair across from me and set the folder between us. These are documents I've kept over the years, I began. I didn't plan to use them, but after yesterday, I realized you needed a reminder. He flipped through the pages. Silent. His brow only tightened when skimming a few expense summaries. When he reached the asset totals, I spoke. You want to cut me from the will, to pressure me into giving up my house. But maybe you forgot. Shelby, with everything you've already given her, has received more than I could ever inherit. Your net worth now, after subtracting mortgage and living costs, is barely $700,000, I said clearly. Shelby has burned through nearly double that, and left nothing behind. Richard said nothing. But I saw him swallow hard. I don't need the will, I said. All I need is the truth. Spoken once, clearly, without excuses. He finally exhaled, eyes still locked on the folder. Cora. How long have you been keeping all this? Since the day Shelby sold that first house, I said. Right after I saw your face. Not angry, not disappointed, just quietly upset that you lost money. Not because of Shelby, but because I saw it. He leaned back, looked at me for a long time. What do you want? I met his eyes. Nothing. Just for you to understand, next time Shelby, or anyone else tries to take what I worked my whole life for, they'll have to deal with this. I tapped the folder. And if you ever threaten to cut me from the will again, remember, there's nothing left to cut. I stood up. Left my coffee untouched. Left my father to sit there and reckon with the cost of favoritism. I didn't look back. I didn't have to anymore. 3 days after meeting Richard at the cafe, I thought things had finally calmed down. He didn't text. Shelby didn't call. I returned to my shifts. Back to dogs choking on chicken bones, cats with broken legs, and tearful pet parents asking, will she make it? Strangely enough, that chaos made me feel more grounded than any family conversation ever had. That Thursday, I was working the morning shift. It was quiet, except for a hunting dog that skated into a street lamp, trying to keep up with his owner. I was still laughing at the video when my phone started buzzing non-stop in my coat pocket. First message came from Amy, my neighbor to the left. Cora, someone's moving stuff into your house. Did you rent it out? Second was from Mr. John, the retired gardener 2 doors down who hated loud noises. There's a U-Haul parked outside. Blonde girl is live streaming a house reveal. You still living there? My chest tightened. One phrase ran through my mind. This can't be happening. I requested emergency leave, swapped my scrub top for a t-shirt, and drove home so fast I might have racked up tickets if traffic cams caught me. And there it was, as I turned the corner into my neighborhood. A massive U-Haul blocked the driveway. The gate was wide open. And Shelby stood on the lawn with a phone mounted on a selfie stick, twirling like a resort ad. Welcome back to my new sanctuary, darlings, she beamed into the camera. Behind her, her 3 kids ran wild. The oldest bounced on the hammock I'd just installed last weekend. The youngest scribbled all over my garage door with black permanent marker. Richard stood on the front porch talking to a man in uniform, a locksmith. I stopped the car in the middle of the road, flung open the door and stepped out, not caring who saw. It felt like I had just been yanked out of my own life. Shelby spotted me first. Oh, you're home early? I was going to surprise you. I didn't respond. I marched straight to Richard. What are you doing here? My voice was low and sharp. He adjusted his collar, trying to stay calm. Cora, I spoke with a lawyer. This house is still a family asset, and you hired a locksmith and let people into my house while I was working? Shelby butted in. Can you not yell? I've got my coming home video scheduled this afternoon. I was going to tag you in the caption. I turned to the locksmith and pulled out my ID and a copy of the property deed. Did you verify the name on the title before changing the locks? I asked flatly. He hesitated, stepped back. They showed me a deed copy, said they had consent. Fake. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. Shelby's tone shifted instantly, like a kid with a stomach ache. You don't have to escalate this, it's just family. I've got 3 kids, you've got, what, IKEA furniture and a cat that plays dead when guests show up? Richard tried to jump in. Cora, you're overreacting. We can work this out privately, no need for police. I stared at him like he'd just asked me to remove my roof for someone who needed better light. You trespassed. Shelby is live streaming a commercial stunt called Spiritual Homecoming. You call this moving in? I call it unlawful entry. I spoke clearly into the phone once it connected. I'd like to report an unauthorized entry and illegal lock change. Individuals are moving property into my home while I'm away. I have full ownership documentation. When the call ended, Richard sank into the porch bench. Shelby took a few steps back, still live streaming, but now framing her face in victim mode. I stood there, on my lawn, watching my home become a prop for their low-budget drama. And realized something. If I didn't finish this, it would never end. They would keep filming, keep faking, keep performing. Unless I was the one to cut the scene. The police arrived in just 15 minutes, faster than I expected. 2 patrol cars pulled up at the same time, freezing Shelby's kids mid-chaos on the lawn. One of the officers, a woman with a sharp gaze, scanned the U-Haul, the nervous locksmith, and Shelby. Now with her live stream off, dress adjusted, and abandoned single mom persona switched on. Your name? The female officer asked. Cora Miller. I'm the legal owner of this house. I handed her notarized copies of my deed, the purchase contract, 3 years of property tax statements, and utility bills, all under my name. And these individuals? She nodded toward Shelby and Richard. They don't live here. I didn't authorize their entry. They hired a locksmith and entered without consent while I was at work. The male officer turned to the locksmith, who was visibly shrinking behind his truck, still holding his toolkit. I was hired to change the locks, he muttered. The man said it was his house. They showed me papers. I didn't verify. Do you still have the papers? The officer asked. The locksmith handed over a wrinkled bundle. The female officer flipped through them, then frowned. This is a Word doc printout. No notary. No property record number. They told you this was the title deed? I didn't say anything, just stared at Richard, trying to keep a calm face, while Shelby whispered frantically to her kids, clearly setting up a narrative of being a family torn apart by greed. The officer turned back to me. Would you like to file a complaint for illegal entry and unlawful possession? I nodded. And I want a formal report. They changed my locks, moved in belongings, and live-streamed claiming the house was theirs. Shelby suddenly burst into tears, or tried to. She's destroying the lives of 3 innocent children. I just wanted them to have a peaceful home. Do you have any proof of ownership? The officer asked bluntly. This is family property, Richard cut in. I'm her father, I have rights. No, you don't, the male officer said flatly. The house is in Ms. Cora's name. Entering without consent, especially with a lock, change and moving in items, is potentially a criminal matter. The locksmith raised his hands. I'll sign a witness report. I had no idea it was fake. They said it was a family transfer. The officers halted all activity and began documenting the incident. One took me aside for a statement and requested digital copies of my documents. The other instructed Richard and Shelby to vacate the premises until further notice. Shelby lost it. This is family violence. We're the victims here. You're yelling in front of children. Lower your voice or I will cuff you, the officer said, dead serious. Richard tried to drag her away, but she kept filming herself, ranting about systemic injustice. I stood silently. Not angry. Not triumphant. Just tired. But that fatigue didn't erase the truth. They'd crossed the final line. Before leaving, the female officer turned to me. You'll receive the official report within 24 hours. If you choose to pursue legal action, retain all evidence. Photos, social media posts, everything. I have it all, I said, and I don't plan on letting this go. As the U-Haul reversed and rolled away, leaving tire marks on the new concrete, I walked into my house, the door still unlocked, and turned the bolt. The living room was a mess. The couch was pushed out of place, the rug stained. A corner of the ceramic vase my mother gave me chipped. All of it could be fixed. All of it. Except the faith I had in the two people I once hoped would choose to do what's right. I pulled out my phone, opened my cloud storage and began uploading every file, every photo, every clip. With one note attached. If they come back again, I won't just call the cops, I'll call my lawyer. I thought things would calm down after the police filed the report and ordered Shelby and Richard to leave my house. But I underestimated just how stubborn and reckless they could be. 2 weeks later, I got a call from a federal investigator. They had opened a formal case based on the evidence I submitted, from the unlawful entry to the forged documents. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. The investigator, Bailey, calm but sharp, asked if I had copies of Shelby's social media videos. I sent the full folder I had saved, clips of her showing off brand collabs, sponsored gifts, unboxing beauty products, clothes, hair tools, all tagged with ads and real company names. Bailey called me back 2 days later. Her voice had shifted. It wasn't just professional anymore, it was disbelief. She's received sponsorships from over 40 brands in the last 18 months. No signed contracts. 12 of them said she failed to deliver content. 6 say they never agreed to a deal. And 3 issued legal warnings for fake engagement stats. I wasn't surprised. She's using fake accounts to like, comment, and boost herself, Bailey added. Also, mall surveillance in Chandler caught her 2 months ago putting items in her bag and walking out unpaid. That case is pending charges. And Richard? I never meant to drag him into this. He was biased, cold, unreasonable. But I never imagined I'd help unravel his entire legacy. Then Bailey said, Ms. Cora, in tracking Shelby's payouts, we found most of the money came from a company called RLM Financials. Do you recognize that name? I froze. RLM, short for Richard Lawrence Miller, was my father's firm. He'd been CFO for over 15 years, and according to Bailey, he had created a fake, experimental marketing expense category to funnel hundreds of thousands of dollars from company funds into his daughter's account. That's embezzlement, she said. If we confirm there was no approval from other executives, he'll be facing criminal charges. Less than 3 weeks later, Shelby was arrested while setting up for her Healing Through Dance workshop at a rented studio. The video of her in handcuffs hit social media within hours, posted by a former fan who'd paid $599 for a course Shelby never held. Richard went silent. 1 week after Shelby's arrest, he was placed on administrative leave. They sealed his work devices and began auditing 7 years of tax records. Some staff revealed he'd been quietly wiring funds to unverified vendors for 3 years, funding Shelby's delusions the entire time. And the kids? When Child Protective Services stepped in, I was genuinely worried. Not because Shelby got arrested, but because the children would be caught in the chaos adults created. Then something unexpected happened. All 3 fathers of each child showed up at the preliminary hearing, requesting custody. One of them, Brian, Olivia's dad, was now married to a child psychologist. He stood before the judge and laid out a full care plan. Schooling, therapy, healthcare, everything. The court agreed, and when the ruling was announced, Shelby slumped in the defendant's chair. For once, without her phone. All 3 kids were placed with Brian and his wife, who live in a quiet suburb outside Peoria. I visited once, at their invitation. A cozy little home. No designer labels, no cameras. No metallic yoga mats. Just the sound of kids laughing, fresh cookies in the oven, and 2 grown-ups finally ready to be real parents. I left with a strange feeling. Like a part of the past I used to resent was slowly being rebuilt, in a way I never saw coming. Got it. Here's the American English translation of the final story segment, following all your instructions on tone, currency, formatting, and policy-compliant phrasing. I still live in that house. The same one they once tried to take from me. The one they live-streamed like it was their personal stage. But now it's quiet. No more U-Haul wheels screeching across the driveway. No more ring lights beaming through the living room window at 9 in the morning. Just me, the soft whistle of my kettle in the afternoon, and the stray cat I adopted from the clinic. Her name is Ginger. She likes sitting on the windowsill and never bothers anyone. At last, no one controls me anymore. After Shelby's arrest, her Instagram account, once followed by over 280,000, plummeted. The promo posts were deleted, the Goddess Vibes tags vanished. Brands that had partnered with her issued public terminations. Complaints flooded in about fake coaching programs, sponsorship money taken, then ghosted. Within less than 3 weeks, her follower count dropped to under 9,000, mostly bots or people sticking around for the drama, and then, the account disappeared. I don't know if she deleted it or if the platform took it down. But by then nobody really cared. Richard hasn't been convicted yet, but the financial investigation is ongoing. He permanently resigned from RLM Financials. I've heard his assets are frozen for auditing. My mother, Laura, moved in with a cousin near Flagstaff, away from all the fallout. She hasn't called me since the police showed up at my door. Then, 3 weeks after the court hearing, I got a handwritten letter. A rarity in an age when people just hit send. The handwriting was messy, the ink smudged by tears, or maybe on purpose. From Shelby. Claire, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but I've lost everything. My account, my work, my kids. I'm staying with an old friend, waiting for my next hearing. I need money to hire a lawyer. I have no one else. If you can help, even just a little, I promise I'll pay it back. I've changed. I truly want to make it right. Shelby. I folded the letter. Didn't feel angry. Didn't feel relieved. I took a picture, wrote "no" across it in red ink, slipped it back in an envelope, and sent it back. Not out of spite, but because I'd learned something. Kindness is not a resource for others to burn through. I can't keep being the safety net for people who never learn to stand on their own. I never went public with this story. No podcasts, no interviews, no healing journey narrative. I just kept going. Repainted the front door Shelby had once covered with a sign reading, "Energy Entrance." I started spending time with myself. Gardening. Blogging about pet health. Not for views, just to share what I know. I even tried baking, though my first muffin came out hard as a rock. One afternoon, while stacking books on a new shelf, I found an old photo. Me at graduation, standing in the courtyard. No parents beside me. Just a small, slightly strained smile. And I froze. Because it hit me. I had spent my whole youth waiting for someone in my family to validate me. But in the end, what I needed wasn't their approval. It was my own respect. Life after a storm isn't loud. It's steady, calm. No one saying it's out of love while trying to control you. I don't know what'll happen to Shelby. I don't know if Richard ever feels regret. But I do know this. They no longer have the power to take away my peace. And that, to me, is worth more than any inheritance ever could be. Got it. Here is the translated version in natural American English, following your formatting and policy requirements. My story proves that sometimes what we need isn't our family's approval, it's the courage to break free from them. I spent years in silence, enduring favoritism and control, only to realize kindness should never be a lifelong obligation. Setting firm boundaries didn't just help me keep my home, it helped me keep myself. In real life, peace doesn't come from being loved the right way, but from loving yourself enough to walk away from what no longer deserves you. What do you think about Cora's choice? Was she too harsh? Or was she finally protecting what she truly deserved? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, real-life family stories. That day, I stood in the middle of the living room wearing a faded dress, while my sister walked down the stairs in a brand new evening gown that cost nearly $1,000. My mother looked at her, eyes glowing with pride. When she turned to me, all she said was a curt, "Don't embarrass the family." I was only 16 years old that day, and that was the first time I clearly understood what it meant to not be the chosen child. But it was also that moment when I swore I would never let anyone diminish my worth just because I wasn't the golden daughter. My name is Mia Lawrence, I'm 28, and I grew up in the suburbs of Greenville, South Carolina. In my family, there were always two parallel worlds. One basked in light, where my sister Alyssa was constantly praised, adored, treated like a princess, and the other, where I existed quietly like a faint shadow. Alyssa is 4 years older than me, now 32, and ever since we were kids, she's been our parents' greatest pride. Back in elementary school, I used to wonder if I had done something wrong. Every time Alyssa got the latest Barbie doll, I received a box of crayons with the caps missing. Every summer she was sent to dance camp in Florida while I stayed home to clean the garage. Even when it came to haircuts, Mom would take her to an upscale salon while I got mine done at home because you just need to keep it tidy. I remember it vividly, a fall morning when I was 14. Elisa had dropped her new iPhone in the school toilet. The very next day, Dad brought her another one, an even newer model. But when my old Nokia broke, Dad said, "Mia, you need to learn to appreciate what you have. We don't print money." But for Elisa, they were willing to go into debt to make sure she never lacked a thing. I started working part-time at 16, morning shifts at a coffee shop, tutoring in the evenings. While Alyssa got her own car at 18 so she wouldn't get too tired commuting to college, I had to walk nearly 2 miles to the public library every day for study group. One time I asked Mom why everything was so unfair. She casually said, "Because Elisa is more fragile than you, you're the strong one, Mia." That answer felt like an invisible slap. Because in my heart, it never felt fair, and never felt true. Even though I was always in the shadows of our family spotlight, I tried not to let it break me. I studied hard, earned a full scholarship to the state university. I bought my first car with money I had saved. I started paying taxes at 17. And Elisa? She changed majors 3 times in 4 years, dropped out, then launched a handmade candle shop, funded by our parents. I wasn't jealous. I just wanted to be seen. Just once. Not as the agreeable one, the one who can take it, or the easy-to-handle little sister, but as a daughter. Also a child. Also deserving. There was one time I had appendicitis while working a night shift at a bakery. I called Mom, doubled over in pain. She answered, her voice groggy. "Can you ask Elisa to take you to the hospital? I'm tired." Elisa didn't pick up. I took a cab to the emergency room alone, clutching my stomach, with no one beside me. After surgery, the first person who visited me wasn't my mom or my sister. It was my coworker from the same shift. Gradually I learned to swallow my pain. Not because I didn't feel anything, But because I knew if I reacted, the family would once again label me the troublemaker. I became the girl of quiet and patience. Until one day I realized, patience isn't a virtue if it turns you into a ghost in your own family. And I started redrawing my boundaries. I learned how to say no. I learned how to step away from dinner tables, where I was only brought up for comparison. And I asked myself, if I ever got married, would they treat me the way they did Alyssa? I don't yet know the answer. But deep down, I'm scared. Because to them, I'll always just be the other daughter. I stared at the computer screen for 5 whole minutes without blinking. That PDF file, titled, Wedding Costs, Mia and Ryan, felt like a dagger right in the middle of my chest. $35,863. Every line item accounted for, down to the last cent. Wedding flowers, $1,200. Wedding cake, $650. Extra chairs for Dad's side of the family, $248. I reached the bottom of the invoice, my hands starting to tremble. Please, pay at your earliest convenience. Your parents expect you to handle this promptly. No thank you, no well wishes, just a demand, cold, precise. I felt my heart twist, as if I'd just been cast out of a family I thought was finally opening its arms. Ryan stood behind me, his shoulders stiff, as he read the message over my shoulder. He turned to me, voice low, each word cutting through his teeth. What the hell is this, Mia? I didn't answer. Because how could I? I was asking myself the same thing. I remembered my mother holding my hand, her eyes soft. I don't want you to feel like you're missing out anymore. This wedding is our gift to you. That line now felt like a cruel joke. A setup. A trap I had walked into, completely unguarded. I didn't sleep that night. I kept pacing, checking emails, rereading every message Mom had sent. Nowhere did it say this was an advance. Nowhere did it say I needed to pay it back. Not one word. I remembered Dad's cheerful voice, as he placed his hand on Ryan's shoulder at the engagement party. We're so proud of her, she finally found a good man to take her home. Every compliment, every hug, every gesture, now felt hollow. The truth laid bare. Harsh and raw, they never meant to give, they were investing, and now expected a return. The next morning, Ryan found me in the kitchen. I can write this check right now, but not because I want to, because you need to end this hurt. I looked at him, eyes red. I don't need their money. I don't need a wedding gift that gets yanked back like a slap. But I do need an answer. I need to be seen as a daughter, not a debt to collect. Ryan hugged me, tight, as if he was trying to hold together all the pieces my family had shattered. That evening, I sat down to write a letter. I couldn't confront them face to face. I knew if I did I'd scream. I'd break down into pieces and then the cycle would just repeat. I'd hurt, they'd blame, and I'd apologize. In the letter I wrote, Mom and Dad, I received the invoice. And I don't understand. You both voluntarily said you'd cover the wedding. You said it was a gift. An expression of love. I never asked, never hinted. I believed you. For the first time in years I thought, maybe I too was worthy of unconditional love. But this invoice tells me I'm just a transaction. I'm not angry about the money, I'm angry about the betrayal. And I'm hurt because once again, I've been reminded that I'm not Alyssa. I folded the letter, placed it in an envelope, and enclosed a check for the full $35,863. Before sealing it I added one final line, my hands shaking, but firm. This will be the last financial interaction between us. From now on, I will not accept, nor require, anything from you, including inheritance. The day I dropped that envelope into the mailbox, the sky was overcast, the wind bitterly cold. But I didn't shiver. I felt relief. Sadness, yes. But in that cold, for the first time, I felt like I was taking back ownership of my life. 3 days passed, no reply, no messages, no calls, no explanation. Silence. The exact kind they always used to punish me whenever I crossed the line. The only difference was, This time, I didn't feel guilty. I thought about Alyssa. About the look in her eyes when she received the keys to the beach house. When Mom placed that 10-carat diamond wedding ring in her hand and said, "You deserve it." I used to dream of hearing those words, but not anymore. I don't need anyone to tell me I deserve it. I know I do. That evening Ryan brought home 2 cups of mint ice cream, my favorite flavor since I was a kid, even though Mom always said, "That flavor isn't classy at all." I smiled while eating, not even noticing when tears started falling. Not because I was hurt, but because, for the first time, I knew who truly chose to stay by my side. I still remember the day of Elisa's wedding, like it was branded into my memory with hot iron. Everything was held at a luxury resort in Charleston, South Carolina, complete with a private golf course, a champagne fountain, and a live jazz band. The cost, as my mother proudly announced at the rehearsal dinner, was $400,000. Totally worth it for my perfect daughter. I stood at the corner of a table, wearing a borrowed dress from a friend, holding a half-finished glass of wine, and smiled as if I were watching a dream. Not because I was happy, but because I had grown used to being the side character in my own life. My parents bought Elisa and her husband a 3-bedroom house in the upscale Isle of Palms neighborhood. The house had a backyard big enough for barbecues and a hot tub straight out of a magazine. They called it the first wedding gift. So, our daughter won't have to suffer like other people. Other people clearly meant me. I didn't say anything, didn't question, didn't complain. I still believed, naively and painfully, that maybe one day my turn would come. Not $400,000. Just a little fairness. 4 years later, at age 28, I got engaged to the man I love, Ryan, a veterinarian at the local clinic. He was the first person who made me feel like I wasn't someone's backup plan. We met at a fundraising event for animal protection. After more than 3 years together, Ryan proposed during a sunset in Asheville, with a ring he had carefully picked out for months. I cried like a child. And then something I never expected happened. When we announced the wedding, my parents offered to pay for the entire thing. I was stunned. Mom hugged me, her eyes glowing brighter than they had on Elisa's wedding day. "I know I've been strict, Mia, but you're my daughter. I'll take care of everything for this wedding. I just want you to be happy." I was speechless. Something inside me softened. As if the wall I had built over the years was beginning to crack. I thought, maybe they've changed. Maybe, at last, I am the daughter worthy of love. My parents got involved in everything, from choosing the venue in the Blue Ridge Mountains, to the cake tasting, to reviewing the guest list. They were unusually enthusiastic. Whenever a problem came up, Dad would wave his hand and say loudly, "Mia doesn't need to worry. If I say it's a gift, it's a gift. This is your time to enjoy." I believed them. We picked a small church with stained glass windows, followed by an outdoor reception. Warm, elegant, and private, just like I'd dreamed. The total cost was estimated to be nearly $36,000. A significant amount, but nothing compared to what they spent on Alyssa. At the reception, my mom gave a speech. She said, "We're proud of both our daughters, but today is Mia's day, and we won't hold back anything to make her happy." The guests applauded. Ryan squeezed my hand. I looked at my mom, choked up, and for the first time in my life, I thought maybe the past could be left behind. That night, I couldn't sleep, not from anxiety, but from joy. Maybe the old wounds didn't matter anymore. Maybe I had been wrong about my parents. We planned to go on our honeymoon a week later, since Ryan still had to finish up the summer vaccination schedule at the clinic. I didn't mind. Everything already felt full. But 2 days later, I got an email from my father titled, "Wedding Costs, Mia and Ryan." I thought it was a keepsake invoice or something sweet. But when I opened it, my hands went cold. A PDF file, over 6 pages long, itemizing every single wedding expense. From the flowers, the cake, even down to the silk-printed invitations. Total, $35,863. And at the bottom, a line that read, "Please pay at your earliest convenience. Your parents expect you to handle this promptly." I froze. I read it again, a second time, a third, but the words didn't change. Cold, clinical, emotionless. No well wishes, no explanation, just a demand, as if I were a customer in a business deal. Ryan walked in and saw me staring blankly at the screen. After reading the email, he gently took my hand. "They don't get to do this to you." I didn't answer. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just sat there, like I had when I was 16, wearing an old dress at my sister's party, quietly witnessing the same truth circle back. This time, sharper than a blade. 3 days after sending the letter and the check, I still hadn't heard back from my parents. No emails, no texts, no explanations or denials, just absolute silence. As if they were waiting to see whether I'd regret it and come crawling back. They didn't know, I was far too tired to ever go back again. On the fourth morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Not because I was restless or anxious, but because today, I was ready to write the first chapter of something I had never had in my life. Boundaries. I sat at the kitchen table, in front of the brown leather journal Ryan had given me on my birthday. I'd never written in it before, but today, I knew exactly what I wanted the first sentence to be. I don't owe anyone anything, just because I was born. Then, I opened my laptop, created a new folder, Closure. Inside I saved a copy of the letter I had sent, a photo of the check and a new file, a formal statement addressed to the family lawyer, where my parents had signed all previous financial documents, and the will. I wrote, plainly, I, Mia Lawrence, formally decline any inheritance, assets or future financial support from Mr. James and Mrs. Loretta Lawrence. Any request, proposal or financial intervention will not be considered. When I sent that email, my heart was pounding, not out of fear, but because it was the first time I chose to walk away from the game they had always forced me to play. That evening, Ryan and I sat on the couch, the warm yellow light casting over the open pages of our books. He reached over and gently squeezed my hand. "Are you sure?" "More sure than ever." Ryan nodded. He didn't say anything else. He understood. In that silence, I felt something I'd never known growing up. Respect. But that fragile silence didn't last long. The next afternoon, the first messages started rolling in, not from my parents, but from extended family. People I hadn't heard from in years suddenly remembered me. An aunt in Nebraska texted, "You should be more understanding, all parents have their reasons. Sending the invoice was just a way to teach you a lesson. Don't make a big deal out of it." An uncle who never even replied to my graduation announcement wrote a 3-page email. "Mia, they did their best. You can't destroy family over one little misunderstanding." I didn't respond. I just saved every message in the closure folder. That night, Sarah called. I didn't answer. 5 minutes later, she was at my front door. I was in the kitchen when the loud banging started. Ryan had just stepped out of the shower when I silently motioned for him to stay back. "MIA. Open the door. What the hell are you doing?" Sarah's voice screeched like a blade. I stood behind the door, saying nothing. I simply pulled out my phone and hit record. Sarah kept going. "Mom and Dad didn't do anything wrong, it was a test. They were going to give you $100,000 but you ruined everything." I let out a silent laugh. They really thought this was some kind of reward-based prank? Sarah screamed. "You're selfish. You're tearing this family apart because of your damn ego. Who do you think you are, Mia?" And then came the line that made me slam the curtain shut and step back. "Do you even know how much Mom and Dad cried over you? Or are you too busy playing the victim for attention?" I stopped the recording, still silent, still behind the door. After 5 minutes of yelling into the void, Sarah left, but not before shoving a piece of paper under the door. "If you don't apologize..." don't expect to ever see anyone in this family again. I picked up the note, folded it into quarters, and tossed it into the small fire in the fireplace. Never looked back. That night, I wrote another line in the brown leather journal. Family isn't a ransom to force someone to bow down. If it's real, it doesn't need conditions. I don't know how long this will drag on. I don't know if my parents will ever acknowledge what they did, but one thing I do know. I stood up. And this time, I'm not sitting back down. I thought the worst was over after sending the check and the letter. But I was wrong. The worst hadn't come yet. The worst was when the entire family started moving in sync, like a choir rehearsed to control the narrative, with me as the center target. It all began the night Sarah showed up pounding at my door. After her yelling and the threat-filled note turned to ash in my fireplace, I thought she was done, but no. The next morning my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Unknown numbers, no names saved. Each time I picked up it started sweet, then turned venomous. "Mia, it's Aunt Shelley. I think you should talk to your mom again. Don't be so stubborn. Family is everything, sweetheart. Sweetie, you really made your father sad. Don't you see you're tearing the family apart?" said an uncle who hadn't remembered my birthday for 5 years straight. Then the messages came like a storm. Facebook, Instagram, even email. People I'd barely exchanged more than 2 words with suddenly jumped in to analyze. "Your parents did this out of love. Why can't you understand?" I understood. I understood to the point of numbness. They didn't love me the way they loved Sarah. They loved me conditionally. They loved me only if I was obedient. If I resisted, I was a thorn to be removed. Ryan saw me shrinking behind my phone screen the entire evening. He yanked the phone from my hands and looked at me firmly. "That's enough, you don't need them rewriting your truth. I just don't want to be seen as the one tearing the family apart." I sighed. Ryan gripped my shoulder. "They decided what you were a long time ago, Mia. The real question is, do you want to keep playing the role they wrote for you?" Eyeing a foothold next to the window. I walked to the window. It was raining outside. I wasn't sure if it was the cold rain, or if it was my heart finally falling apart. The next afternoon, I went to the store to get milk and bread. While I was waiting in line to pay, a woman I recognized as a friend of my mother approached. "Mia, oh my goodness, your mother hasn't been eating for days, you're so heartless." I turned to her, voice soft but colder than the wind outside. "Did you see her heartbreak when she sent me that invoice? Or when she left me alone in the hospital at 18 with appendicitis?" She froze. I paid and left. But it didn't stop there. That evening, Sarah came back. This time, with a camera. Ryan was working a night shift. I was home alone. When the doorbell rang, I checked the video feed. Sarah was standing there with a man, filming everything on his phone. She shouted, "This is the house where the ungrateful little sister decided to abandon her whole family over a misunderstanding? She refused the $100,000 our parents wanted to give her. What do you think? Do kids today have any gratitude?" I didn't open the door. I stood in the living room, my hands trembling with rage. This wasn't family. This was a show. And I was the villain in the narrative they wanted the world to see. I called the police, saved the footage as evidence. When the patrol car arrived, Sarah finally left, but not before shouting one last thing into the house. "You'll die alone, Mia, and when our parents die, don't expect anyone to call you to the funeral." The door shut. I sank to the floor, gasping, not from fear, but from shock. I never imagined that after all those years of hoping, what I'd get in return was a coordinated takedown by people who once called themselves family. That night, I wrote again in the brown journal. "When your sister gets rewarded for silence, and you're punished for telling the truth, you'll know who's truly free." I started documenting every call, every message, every person who joined the guilt campaign. Not for revenge, but to prepare. Because I knew, if I didn't stand firm, next time it wouldn't be an invoice. It would be something more insidious, more painful, disguised as love. And I had made my choice. This time, I wouldn't bow. I wouldn't apologize for protecting myself. I wouldn't stay silent to keep a fake peace. If I had to be labeled ungrateful to live in truth, then so be it. Because I'd rather be the bad daughter than spend my life as a well-behaved puppet. What I didn't expect was that the message from Uncle Elliot, my father's only brother, would be the one that left me completely speechless. Mia, this is Uncle Elliot, your dad's brother. I know the whole family's turned their back on you, and I think it's time you knew the truth. Call me when you're ready. I was never particularly close to Uncle Elliot. At family gatherings, he always stood off to the side, made small talk with a few people, then quietly left before anyone noticed. My father used to say he was stubborn, disrespectful, and always blowing things out of proportion. I believed that. Until now. I called him back. His voice was low and calm, but sharp like a razor. After a few awkward pleasantries, he got straight to the point. Your dad is repeating exactly what our parents did to me. The only difference is, this time, the victim is you. I sat upright, heart pounding. What do you mean? I asked, though deep down, I already sensed there was something dark beneath it all. 20 years ago, Uncle Elliot began. I was forced to give up a study abroad scholarship because our parents didn't approve of me majoring in fine arts. They wanted me to go into banking, like your father. When I refused, they did everything they could. They emptied my savings, spread rumors that I had stolen money from the family, and the person who sided with them was your dad. I was speechless. Everything he said felt like puzzle pieces falling into place. The final pieces that made the family picture horrifyingly clear. A cycle of financial manipulation, passed down from generation. I used to think your dad was a victim. But when he started treating you the same way our parents treated me, I realized he never learned the lesson. He just passed on the same control, the same pressure, using the same outdated weapon, money. They broke me once, he continued, voice cracking. And now they're doing the same thing to you. I bit my lip, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. I thought back to the wedding invoice. The way Dad called it, a lesson in responsibility. It was exactly how Uncle Elliot described it, a carbon copy of the past. They told me if I didn't comply, I'd be erased from the family records. And I was. No one came to my wedding. I was devastated. I questioned myself. Wondered if I was wrong. Just like you are now. The dam of emotion broke inside me. I couldn't hold it in. I kept thinking I was being too sensitive. I kept worrying I was overreacting. But now I see. I was just the next in line in this pattern. And you did something your father never had the courage to do, Uncle Elliot cut in. You stood up. I said nothing. I couldn't tell if I felt pain or relief. Just that memories came flooding back. The time they forgot me during parent-teacher night because my sister had a cold. The time I stood outside the hospital alone after my appendectomy, waiting for someone who never came. The time my father told me, "You should be grateful we raised you." I didn't want to hate them. I had tried to understand. Tried to forgive. But now I understood. Forgiveness doesn't mean letting yourself be stabbed in the back over and over. Thank you. So much, I said, voice trembling. I never thought I'd hear something like this from anyone in the family. I know, he replied, and I called. Because I don't want you to disappear into the dark the way I once did. We ended the call nearly an hour later. When I hung up, I felt empty, but quietly at peace. For the first time in weeks, there was calm after the storm. That evening, Ryan and I sat on the rooftop. The breeze was soft, the sky full of stars. He handed me a cup of tea, his eyes gentle. Are you okay? Not completely, but for the first time, I feel like I have an ally. I told him everything Uncle Elliot had said. Ryan sat in silence for a long while, then nodded. I always knew you weren't weak, but now, I think you're stronger than anyone I've ever known. I leaned my head on his shoulder and closed my eyes. In the still darkness, I whispered, "And I won't repeat their mistakes. I won't live under control, or under invisible debts disguised as love." And in that moment, I knew I wasn't going back. I didn't expect anything more from my parents after all that, truly. I believed the relationship had rotted to the root, beyond repair. But then, on a Friday afternoon, just after I got off work and was waiting at the red light at Rivers and Main, my phone buzzed. A voicemail. I didn't check it right away, but once I pulled into the driveway I finally looked and froze when I saw the sender's name. Dad. James Lawrence. His voice in the recording was unlike anything I'd ever heard before. No anger, no threats, none of his usual superiority. Just a hoarse, tired, slightly shaky voice. "Mia. I don't want this to go on any longer. If you're willing, I'd like to meet just the two of us. I think we need to talk. I'll be waiting." I replayed the voicemail 3 times. Each time a sharp ache grew in my chest. Not out of hope, but because I recognized something familiar. The thing that haunted me all through childhood. The longing for acknowledgement. I didn't respond right away, I let myself think it through. Not because he deserved it, but because I needed to be sure. I wouldn't walk back into that conversation just to become the same obedient, easily wounded daughter I used to be. 3 days later, I agreed to meet. A small cafe on the north side of the city. Neutral ground. A place with no shared memories, where I could remain in control. Dad arrived on time. He wore a white button-down shirt and gray slacks, looked just like the image I remembered of him at the family firm. But he looked older. More gray in his hair, puffy eyes. The commanding presence was gone, slightly hunched now. We ordered drinks and sat across from each other. No one spoke for the first 2 minutes. Finally, he said, "Mia, I know that invoice, it wasn't right." "Not right?" I raised an eyebrow. "You call sending me a nearly $36,000 bill after volunteering to pay for the wedding not right?" He sighed. "I'm not saying it was right, I just didn't realize it would hurt you that much." I gave a cold chuckle. "So you thought it would make me grateful?" He said nothing. After a moment, he pulled out a white envelope from his leather bag. "This is the check you sent. I never cashed it. I don't intend to. I just wanted you to know. Everything I did was to teach you responsibility." I clenched my fists, fingernails digging into my palms. "Did you ever send Elisa an invoice for responsibility? When you gave her a house, when you threw her that fairy tale wedding, did you ever ask her to repay you just to teach a lesson?" He didn't look at me. His eyes were fixed on the coffee in front of him. "I didn't think about it. Things were different then." "Different how, Dad?" I cut in. My voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp. "Different because she's the daughter you love? And I'm the one who always needs to be taught?" The air thickened. He finally looked up. And for the first time in my life, there was no pride in his eyes. Only confusion. Only vulnerability. "I'm sorry. If you ever felt abandoned—" "You don't need to say if, Dad," I interrupted. "I didn't feel abandoned. I was abandoned. And not just once." I looked at him, more direct than I'd ever been. "I didn't come here to get my money back. I came here to make it clear. This is no longer about money. It's about the pain I've carried for 28 years. I pushed the envelope toward him. "I won't take it back, because if I do, you'll think everything can be solved with money, and next time, you'll do it to someone else." He didn't say anything, just gave a small nod, but in his eyes, I saw something break. Not full remorse. But maybe, for the first time, he realized he no longer had control. "I don't want to lose you, Mia," he said hoarsely. "You lost me a long time ago," I said as I stood. "The only difference now is I've stopped pretending I wasn't hurt." I walked away. No looking back, no tears. Just a deep sense that I had finally moved the boulder that had sat on my chest for nearly 3 decades. That night, I sat beside Ryan on the couch and told him everything. "How do you feel?" he asked, eyes fixed on mine. I pressed my lips together, then nodded softly. I don't need a perfect apology. I just needed to know that I was strong enough to say everything I was once forced to swallow. After that final meeting with my dad, I returned home with a strange but clear emptiness. No more inner battles. No more questioning whether I was right or wrong. I didn't win. I didn't lose. I just got free. I placed the envelope containing the check in the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet, locked it, and stuck a note on top. Not to be used as payment for forgiveness. From that day on, I unfollowed every family member's social media. I blocked Sarah's number. I turned off notifications for the extended family group on Facebook. To me, it wasn't a rash break. It was a conscious decision, like cutting out a thorn that had been buried in my skin for far too long. I no longer hoped my mother would call just to say, "I miss you." I stopped wishing Sarah would show up, in silence. No yelling, no blame. I let go of the dream that my father would say, "I'm proud of you." And the moment I stopped waiting for those things, I began to feel free. Ryan, the only man who had never made me question whether love was real, was the one person who never asked me to prove anything, to be accepted. One night, he hugged me from behind while I tended to the lavender pot on our balcony. "Do you think you'll ever forgive them?" he asked. I didn't turn around. I just held his hand against my waist. "Maybe, but not so they can come back." I began to write again. Not letters. A new life plan. Ryan and I decided to leave Greenville. We didn't want to stay in a place full of bruised memories. We moved to Asheville, surrounded by trees, mountains, quiet streets, and a kind, artistic community. I changed jobs, left the old company, where a few people still kept in touch with Sarah. I started working for a green tech startup where everyone called each other by first names, no titles, no hierarchy. For the first time, I didn't have to prove anything beyond my skills and kindness. Every Sunday morning, I made tea, played jazz, and read unfinished pages from my favorite books. No one demanded anything. No one questioned me. No one ever said, "You should understand because you're Mia." I started going to therapy regularly. And during one session, the therapist asked, "Mia, if you could send one message to your 16-year-old self, the girl sitting alone by her hospital bed with no one visiting, what would you say?" I choked up. It took a while before I could speak. I'd say, "Stop waiting. You deserve love, even when you're not being the good girl." I cried. But this time, the tears weren't weakness. They were relief. Sarah never reached out again. And I don't want her to. I know if she ever did, it would be another battle. Not a reconciliation. My father never called again either. Maybe he understood. Maybe he still thinks I'm ungrateful. Either way, it doesn't matter anymore. My mother, the one who used to say, "Mia is the cold-hearted one," remains silent. Silent, just as she always was when I needed an embrace. I'm not angry anymore. Because anger only kept me in the room they built. And now I've stepped outside. Ryan and I painted our new home together. Olive green walls, white trim, large windows facing a line of trees. We planted wildflowers along the fence. I named the stray cat I adopted Hope. Because it came into my life right when I thought I had stopped believing in anything. One day, while Ryan was reading a book, I asked, "If we have a daughter someday, what's the first thing you think we should teach her?" Eating. He didn't take long to answer. That she doesn't need to be perfect to be loved. I smiled, nodded. And that if someone tells her to be nice, she has every right to ask, "And what about them?" Ryan held me close. He didn't say a word. But I knew he understood. And I knew, finally, I had made it out. I don't need the family I was born into to validate me. I don't need a family dinner full of comparisons to be seen as good. I just need a life. One where I own my feelings and write the next chapter on my terms. A chapter with no invoices disguised as lessons, no tears spilled for conditional love. A chapter where every day I get to be Mia. Whole, free, and unafraid. Mia's story is a powerful reminder that sometimes, to find true peace, we must walk away from those we thought were bound to us by blood. Not everyone who gives us life knows how to love us properly. Healing doesn't come from patching up toxic ties, but from the courage to step out and build the life we deserve. Mia chose herself. And that's the bravest decision anyone hurt by family can make. What do you think about Mia's choice? Was she too harsh? Or was this the only way to protect herself? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories about family and life. My name is Lydia. I'm 36 years old, living in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I used to believe that silence was the best way to keep a family from falling apart. For the past 3 years, I've been transferring $1,745 every month to cover the mortgage on the house my mother lives in. That house sits in the suburbs of Greensboro, where I grew up, where old memories still linger, and where now, I'm no longer welcome. I'm not someone who seeks attention. Everything I did for the family was quiet: paying the electricity bills, fixing the roof after a storm, replacing the fridge when the old one leaked for a month and no one moved a finger. No one asked me to do it, but if I didn't, no one would. I used to think that if I helped long enough, maybe they'd start to see me as part of them. But then last Christmas came. And everything collapsed. Every year, by the end of November, my mother, Judith, would send out a group email to plan the holiday. Who brings what dish? Who handles the tree, the Christmas music, the gift schedule? That year, I got nothing. I assumed they forgot, so I waited patiently. One day, I opened the shared Google Drive folder we usually use to organize gifts, recipes, and even that year's playlist. It was gone. Every link now led to the same cold message. Access denied. I texted my younger sister. Sarah? A simple question. I can't find the Christmas folder. Did you take it down? No response. It wasn't until that evening that I received a text from my mother. Just one line. You must be busy this year, don't worry about Christmas. No checking in, no regret. Just a polite rejection, crafted to avoid confrontation. But to me it sounded like a steel door slamming shut. For good. Didn't cry. Crying is for things you don't expect. But me? I had a feeling. Still, when I read that message, I sat motionless on a kitchen chair for almost 10 minutes, like something inside me had just cracked. I didn't get angry. I simply realized one thing. While I was still making monthly mortgage payments, they were hanging garlands, wrapping presents, and silently crossing my name off their list. 2 years ago, I arrived late on Christmas Eve because of a client meeting that ran until 8 p.m. I brought a box of warm homemade gingerbread cookies and gifts for everyone. When I walked in, no one even looked up. Dinner was already served, every seat taken. I stood by the sink, eating off a paper plate. Someone muttered, "Oh, she remembered to show up." Everyone laughed. I never found out who said it, but it doesn't matter now. Back then, I made excuses. The holidays are stressful, I told myself. Maybe they didn't mean to forget I don't eat smoked meat. Maybe they just overlooked the mashed potatoes I bring every year, always gone by the end of the night. But now, I know better. Nothing about this was random. It was a decision. And I wasn't part of the vote. The next morning, I got up early and opened my December budget spreadsheet. Every line was clear. Mortgage, $1,745. Auto payment scheduled for the 3rd of each month. 36 months without fail. In that house, they hosted birthdays, small weddings, even my niece's graduation party. On hardwood floors I paid to have installed, but in all those moments, not once did anyone think to save me a seat at the table. I didn't cancel the payments right then, but for the first time, I stared at that number and asked myself a question I had never dared to voice. Why am I paying for a life I'm not even invited to be part of? That evening, I didn't turn on YouTube for another cheesy Christmas comedy. I sat in my apartment, quiet, treeless, undecorated, and let the silence settle. But this time, the silence wasn't loneliness. It was a reckoning. And I heard it loud and clear. I started paying closer attention to the empty spaces, not just in messages, but in the way they talked about me, or more accurately, the way they avoided mentioning me at all. A week after my mother's text, I checked the old group chat that used to include me, Sarah, our cousin Dylan, and Lexi, the one that was always buzzing during the holidays. The group had been renamed the Core Four. My name was no longer in the member list. I tried opening Holiday Central, the chat we used last year when we argued for hours over which song should open Christmas Eve. That group had vanished too. I searched my inbox for past invites, gift fund reminders, anything at all. But everything was blank. It didn't feel like I'd been forgotten. It felt like I'd been erased. While I was sitting still, my phone buzzed. A notification from Instagram. Lexi just posted a new story, home for the holidays. I opened it. A long dining table covered in a red cloth. Glowing yellow lights, people laughing, wine glasses raised. I recognized the chandelier above the table. It was the one I ordered from New York and personally drove down 2 years ago, because my mother had said the local options looked cheap. At the center of the photo was my mother, Judith, pouring wine for Lexi, her hand gently resting on Sarah's shoulder. No one seemed to notice the phone recording, or maybe they just didn't care. The caption underneath, written by Sarah, read, "Family is where the heart always finds its way back." I zoomed into every corner of the table. There wasn't a single empty chair. That night, I pulled out a box of old cards from the drawer. Cards I'd kept because I believed one day I would look back and feel like I truly belonged somewhere. To our beloved Lydia. Thanks for always being the reliable one. Couldn't have pulled this off without you. But now, reading them felt hollow. They were like copy-paste messages, repeated every year, signed, sent, and forgotten. I started retracing every Christmas. The year I was 30, when I bought a silver flatware set for the party. My mother said, "Oh, Lydia, that must have been expensive. But well, since you've already bought it, let's use it." The year I was 32, when I stayed up until nearly 2 a.m. decorating 120 gingerbread cookies for the church gathering. When I arrived, they were dumped into a nameless basket, and my mother smiled at the guests. "Sarah made these, so talented." I used to think, well, I'm the older one, let it go. I told myself that as long as they were happy, it didn't matter. But each little memory, when strung together, turned into evidence. It wasn't forgetfulness. It was a deliberate reshaping of my presence to fit their comfort. One evening after work, I stopped by the grocery store to pick up a few things. As I walked past the holiday display section, I saw a girl, maybe 12 years old, choosing ornaments for the Christmas tree. Beside her stood her mother, listening to her daughter excitedly talk about decorating her very own tree this year. I didn't know them, but those words tightened something in my chest. I realized I had never had a Christmas that was fully mine. As a child, I was the quiet one who had to give up the solo angel part to Sarah. As an adult, I was the one who paid, planned, drove, but was always treated like nice to have but not essential. Back at my apartment, I placed my grocery bag on the kitchen counter and reached for a glass of water when the phone rang. A video call. From Lexi. I was mildly surprised. I answered. Her face appeared on screen. The background clearly my mother's living room. She smiled and said, "Lydia, I just wanted to ask, are you planning to send your usual appetizer this year? Mom said it's not necessary, but I thought if you made it." I cut in, calmly, "Are you asking about the dish or just checking if I plan to show up?" Lexi paused. I saw a flicker of confusion, then defensiveness in her eyes. "What do you mean? We all agreed this year should be lighter. Less tension." I said nothing. I just looked at her. After a few seconds of silence, she quietly ended the call. No Merry Christmas. No apology. I sat down on the floor, back against the wall, watching the wall clock tick slowly. The feeling wasn't abandonment. It was something colder. Something far more calculated. It had been revalued, downgraded, far below what my own heart had ever allowed. I couldn't sleep at all the night after Lexi's call. One sentence kept looping in my head. We all agreed. We? Since when did we no longer include me? Around 3 a.m., I reopened Instagram, combing through every trace. Dylan's story had already disappeared, but one photo remained on Lexi's page. The entire family gathered around the table. Red wine, roasted turkey, glowing candles. Beneath it was a comment from my mother, Judith. Nothing like a peaceful Christmas with those truly connected. I scrolled down and spotted a comment from a user named Becca_N_craft, Lexi's college friend. So glad the tough decision was made. The party looks amazing. Tough decision? I tapped to expand the thread and found a vague but telling exchange. A relative asked, "Is everyone okay? Feels like someone's missing." Sarah replied with a half-smiling emoji and the message, "Sometimes you have to do what's best for the group." I sat up straight. My chest tightened. There was no doubt anymore. They had discussed it. Maybe not in a formal meeting, but the decision was made, and I was erased. Me. The one still paying the mortgage on the very house they were laughing in. I opened my computer and pulled up every financial document I had. The mortgage agreement from 3 years ago. Signed when my mother had just retired and was denied a loan due to unstable income. She called me while I was in Dallas on a business trip. I remember her exact words. "I just need you to sign, so the bank feels more secure. I'll take care of everything else." I believed her. How could I not? She was my mother. I signed the papers without reading them closely. Now, staring at the document, it felt like someone had dumped a bucket of ice water over me. I was the co-signer, equally responsible under the law, but the property title? Only one name, Judith A. Bishop. I searched my email for the bank's confirmation notices, then cross-referenced every transaction. The refrigerator I paid for last April, $1,370. The exterior repaint, in September? $2,600. The gray leather sofa my mother said looked like a waiting room couch but later raved about to her friends? $3,880. All from my account. And every time it came up they'd say, "Sarah has such great taste," or, "Lexi really picked the right color." I was never credited. I opened my personal drive, where I had carefully archived every utility bill, property tax statement, maintenance schedule, and mortgage receipt. Each one had a date and a transaction ID. That house didn't function because they were a well-oiled unit. It functioned because I was the invisible engine keeping it running. I clicked into an old folder, where I'd saved the design plans for the kitchen remodel. As I scrolled to the bottom, something new caught my eye. A file uploaded 6 weeks ago by Sarah's account. Holiday budget summary. I opened it. The header read, "Financial contributions, exclude Lydia." I read it 3 times. The breakdown was clear. Dylan was in charge of gifts for the kids. Lexi handled desserts. Sarah covered the live band for Christmas Eve, and at the bottom, in small, cold text, "Do not include Lydia, to avoid tension." Mom agreed. I felt my heart drop. I wasn't forgotten. I was excluded. Deliberately. Systematically. And I had no idea. While I was still covering December's mortgage like every year before. I left my desk and stepped onto the balcony. The night air was brutal. The wind slapped my face, like a truth I'd been avoiding. I didn't cry. I had no tears left for things that were now unmistakably clear. But I also wasn't the woman who would nod and stay silent anymore. I returned to my desk, opened a new folder and named it Exit Plan. I began dragging in files. Bills. Contracts. Screenshots. Payment confirmations. I stuck a note beside my monitor. If they erased me from the family, I'll erase myself from their burden. On the morning of December 21st, I made coffee like usual, except this time my hands were steady. No more just wait a few more days. No more maybe they'll come around. I opened my laptop, launched the banking app, and slowly typed in my password like it was a sacred ritual. Under auto payments, there it was. Crenshaw Mortgage Services, $1,745. Scheduled for December 23rd. I hovered over cancel recurring payment. One click. No second thoughts. No confirmation. And just like that, it vanished. As if it was never my duty to begin with. I stood, poured the rest of my coffee, and looked out the window. North Carolina was wrapped in fog, but inside I had never felt clearer. I told no one. No text to my mother. No warning email to Sarah. This silence wasn't surrender. It was a boundary. That afternoon, I reviewed the utility bills. The internet was still under my name, same for Greensboro City Power, gas heating, and the homeowner's insurance. All things I once said were just to give Mom peace of mind, and she never argued. I logged into each account, navigated to service termination, and selected the cancel date. December 24th, Christmas Eve. I took screenshots of every confirmation email, saved them into the freshly updated exit plan folder. When done, I sat back and exhaled. Like I'd just packed up a home that no longer felt like mine. I knew they wouldn't notice right away. They were used to everything just working. Lights on, heat flowing, Wi-Fi steady. As if the house maintained itself. And that's what hurt the most. They never once stopped to ask who was keeping things running. That evening, I stopped by a local bookstore and bought a moss green leather journal. On the first page, I wrote, "Freedom isn't leaving. It's no longer being held by one-sided obligation." I taped the October water bill onto the next page as a marker. The final month I contributed without acknowledgement. December 23rd came and went without incident. I worked remotely, completed the quarterly report for finance. At the end of the day, just as I shut my laptop, a message popped up. "Dylan added you to Bishop Family Chat." I froze. Inside the chat, Lexi had posted a photo of their almost finished dinner setup, with the caption, "Just need a touch more golden light." My mother replied underneath, "Must be the bulbs. Strange how dim they seem this year." I let out a small laugh. Light? Just wait until tomorrow night. On the evening of the 24th, I didn't do anything special. I made potato soup, lit a cinnamon candle in the kitchen, and revisited my digital folder. I checked each email. Every service now showed status. Cancelled. I didn't feel triumphant, but I felt light. Like I'd restored justice to a place where I once thought it didn't matter. Around 6:15 p.m. my phone buzzed. A text from Dylan. "Is something wrong with the power? Is the whole block out?" Seconds later. "Sarah. Liddy. Do you know what's going on? The house lost power right before dinner." A minute later, my mom called. I stared at Mom on the screen, let my finger rest on decline for 5 seconds, then let the call fade away. More messages followed. "Lexi, did you really do this?" "Sarah, everyone's freaking out." And then, the final one from my mother. "If you did this, I'll never forgive you." I didn't respond. I didn't need their forgiveness. I just needed them to understand. Comfort comes at a cost. And someone's been paying. I got up, opened the window, and let the cold air flood the room. Outside, the streets were eerily quiet. This Christmas didn't feel sad. Just different. And that difference was mine to own. I had stopped waiting for something that was never coming. Acknowledgement. Back at my desk, my phone buzzed one last time. "Lexi? Mom's crying. Dad called the power company. They said the account's in your name. Did you really do this?" I read it. Flipped the phone face down. No explanation needed. For once, my silence had weight. On Christmas night, around 7 p.m., while I sipped Merlot by candlelight at my kitchen table, my phone lit up with a flood of messages. Sarah. Power's out, Mom's freaking out. Dylan. Internet's down, we can't reach the live band. Lexi. Was it you, Lydia? Please don't tell me you actually. I didn't reply. I set my wine glass down, turned on the radio to soft classical music, and curled into my armchair. Outside, snow began to fall. I wrapped myself in a thin blanket and let the world outside scramble in a darkness they never expected. An hour later, my phone rang. Mom. I didn't touch it. 7 missed calls followed, then, one final text. Short. Familiar. Almost comical in its predictability. You really are the disgrace of this family. I read it without reacting. No sting, no anger. Just the numb familiarity of a cassette tape played too many times. I had heard enough. Now it was their turn. To hear themselves, in silence, and in the dark. At 9:18 p.m. an email came in from Olivia. My cousin, the only one who checked on me last year when I had the flu, subject line, you need to hear this. Inside, a single audio file and one sentence. I don't agree with how they treat you. They think I don't notice. But I recorded it. I put on headphones. The first voice was Sarah, tense, bitter. I told you. She always makes things heavy, like she's the backbone of everything. Then Dylan, scoffing. We only let her name be on the accounts because her credit score's high, not because we trust her. Then my mother, calm and tired, as if reciting something well-rehearsed. I never really saw Lydia as part of the family. She's just convenient. Always showing up on time, paying on time. But no one remembers someone just for paying the bills. A long pause. Then laughter. No pushback. No defense. I took off the headphones. Not because I was shocked. Because I wasn't. I had always suspected. Now I had proof. I opened my exit plan folder and created a new subfolder, audio proof. The file saved as convenient_not_family MP3. It sounded like a brand, but really, it was just the truth. By midnight, I placed my phone on the table and turned on silent mode. Outside, faint fireworks welcomed Christmas. I didn't turn on the TV, didn't scroll, didn't seek apologies, because I knew they wouldn't come. My apartment remained bright, warm, and quiet. Unlike the house in Greensboro, where candles might be lit, flashlights might flicker, and wine might be poured in darkness, here, no one needed me to be the background to their comfort. At 1 a.m., Olivia texted again. I couldn't stomach what they said. You deserve better. I replied with just one sentence. I know. And I'll make sure they know too. Not with arguments. Not with blame. But by letting the truth speak for itself. With that audio, the bills, the records, I had everything. And soon, they would be forced to face the foundation they'd been standing on all this time. The one person they thought they could discard at will. I closed my eyes, letting the music drift in. Tonight, I wasn't left out of the table. I walked away, carrying the light. And left behind one question they'd all be asking, come morning. If Lydia's gone, who's keeping everything together now? On the morning of December 25th, I woke up earlier than usual. No alarms, no calls reminding me about breakfast. No one expected me to make French toast, like every other year. My apartment was completely silent, and to me that was the most soothing sound after a long year suffocated by unspoken obligations. I made coffee, opened my laptop, pulled up the exit plan folder, and clicked on the section I titled Impact. There I had sorted everything into 3 separate bundles: financial, legal, personnel. Each file was clearly labeled and easy to navigate. Electric bills, property tax declarations, furniture receipts, and most prominently, the audio file titled convenient_not_family MIT 3. The first email I sent was to Mr. Richard Foreman, Director of Human Resources at the bank where Dylan worked. Subject line: Report regarding ethical and financial misconduct, Dylan Bishop. I didn't include any harsh language, just facts. For the past 3 years, Dylan and the family had used property listed under my name for personal gain, without financial transparency. I attached account statements showing I had been paying for housing, utilities, and lastly, the audio clip where he scoffed about letting her be on the paperwork because she has good credit. The second email went to the Winterlight Foundation, a charity board where my mother, Mrs. Judith Bishop, was publicly referred to as the inspiring woman behind our community drives. I had anonymously donated for 2 consecutive years over $6,000 from my personal account at her request. In the email, I clarified the true source of the contributions, attaching donation receipts and bank transactions. Ended with a sentence: I am not requesting a refund, I only ask that my name be properly attributed, or at the very least, separated from these fabrications. The final email I sent to Valerie Price, an editor at the Charlotte Gazette, whom I had once worked with on an article about housing for low-income families. I sent only one thing: the audio file. No commentary. No agenda. I let the truth speak for itself. 30 minutes later, the first response came from Valerie. We are reviewing the content. If verified, this could be a serious matter regarding the Bishop family's public reputation. That afternoon, I shut my laptop and went out to get a cheese baguette and a latte. When I returned, an official notice was already posted on the Winterlight Foundation's website. Due to unclear funding origins during the 2020-2023 period, we are temporarily removing Mrs. Judith Bishop's name from our list of honorary representatives, pending review. I wasn't surprised. I just felt justice. A quiet kind of justice I once thought only existed in movies. Around 4 p.m., Olivia texted, "What did you just do? Dylan's been called into HR." An hour later, Dylan called. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. "Lydia, have you lost your mind? You went public with family matters? I could lose my job." I listened, then deleted it. He called it family matters. I called it the truth. And the truth doesn't need permission to exist. My mother stayed silent the whole evening. No messages, no accusations. But I knew she saw it. I knew she was livid in the dark. Not just because she was humiliated, but because for the first time, I wasn't there to clean up the mess. Around 8 p.m., Valerie emailed again. "We're considering an article about the truth behind ideal families during the holidays. If you're open to sharing, we'd love to hear more about your role and how you quietly carried the weight." I didn't respond right away. Not because I was afraid, but because I was deciding whether now was the time to finally tell my story. That night, I wrote in my notebook, "Not everyone wants the truth. But eventually everyone has to live with the consequences of ignoring it." 2 days after Christmas, I woke up with a clear, cold sense of calm. I no longer cared what people said behind my back. I no longer counted missed calls or angry messages. I made a cup of black tea, sat down at my desk, opened my laptop and started typing. No warm greetings. No dear mom. I've been cut off from this family, so I'm withdrawing from its finances. I hold no further responsibility for the house in Greensboro. No more utility bills under my name, no more mortgage liabilities. I'm no longer the invisible engine that kept things running without recognition. And I'm no longer the silent wallet funding parties I was never invited to. I attached a single PDF, a line-digit breakdown of every expense I'd paid from 2020 until now, including roof repairs after the storm, a new heating unit, last winter's utility bills, every detail accounted for. Next to each line was a clear note: not requesting reimbursement, No expectations, for record only. I titled the email, Termination of Financial Responsibility. Recipients: Judith Bishop, with copies to Dylan, Sarah, Lexi, and Olivia. I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't want one. The next morning I went to the Charlotte branch of the bank where I held my main account. The same place I'd signed on to co-finance the house for my mother. A young woman named Cassidy greeted me. Her smile was professional, but her eyes flicked to the thick folder I carried. I placed it on the desk. I'd like to transfer full responsibility for the loan to the primary borrower, Mrs. Judith Bishop. Here's the notarized request, her signed consent, and verification from an independent legal office. Everything is prepared. She blinked, hesitating slightly. Miss Lydia, you understand that once this is signed, you'll no longer have access or authority over any aspect of this loan. I understand, I said evenly. And I don't need it. Cassidy carefully reviewed every document and signature. After about 15 minutes, she confirmed. It'll take 3 to 5 business days to update our records, but as of now, your legal obligations toward the loan are officially concluded. I signed one last line beneath the phrase, full financial responsibility transfer. As the pen left the paper, I felt something slip from around my chest. An invisible chain I'd worn for the past 3 years. No one walked me out of the branch. I didn't need anyone. I opened the door myself, stepped into the daylight, and let the winter wind brush my collar. Back home, I checked my phone. No surprise, my mother had called 3 times and left a voicemail over a minute long. I didn't listen, but I read the texts that followed. You're destroying everything I built. This can't be undone. Do you even understand the consequences? I didn't respond. Instead, I opened a new email. This one was addressed to my personal attorney, a woman I met last year at a financial independence seminar for women. I wrote, requesting consultation on next steps to fully protect personal assets, including privacy, reputation, and avoidance of any unnecessary civil entanglements with family third parties. I never thought I'd need a lawyer to guard my boundaries from my own blood. But today, I didn't feel defeated. I felt clear-headed, because finally, I'd accepted what I'd spent a lifetime delaying. Love doesn't come with obligation if there's no acknowledgement. That afternoon, Olivia texted me. I just walked out of the church where everyone's gathered, people are talking, Mom says you betrayed the family. I replied. I didn't betray anyone, I just let go of the rope they kept tightening. I stood in front of the mirror and looked into my eyes. Gone was the girl desperate to please. All I saw was a woman who finally ended the exploitation. At the exact right moment. The first week of January passed in a kind of quiet I hadn't known since entering adulthood. No sudden phone calls, no accusatory texts, no requests like, "Can you help Mom with this one little thing?" or, "Sarah's short on her phone bill from last month, can you spot her?" Everything was silent. And to me, it wasn't an eerie emptiness. It was a breath of space. Each morning, I got up early, brewed my own coffee, and read a few chapters of books I'd never had time to open before. I walked around the park near my home, letting the winter chill sting my cheeks and the wind sweep through my hair, like it was rinsing away the years I'd spent as someone's convenient shadow. I started rewriting my personal financial plan, for the first time, just for me. One Saturday afternoon, as I was placing some dried lavender stems into a glass jar, the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and froze. Olivia, my cousin, stood there holding a canvas bag, wearing a thin coat, eyes cast downward like she was wrestling something inside. I opened the door. No words, no smile. She stepped in, set the bag on the table, and pulled out a tin of ginger cookies. The kind I've loved since childhood but never once received from anyone. I made them myself, Olivia said softly. Wasn't sure if you still liked them. I nodded slightly and invited her to sit by the fireplace. The room was quiet for a few minutes, the only sound being the soft crackle of burning logs. I needed to say something, she began. "I heard everything they said at the party and after it all blew up. And I felt ashamed." I stayed silent. I let her continue. "I used to think staying out of it meant I wasn't doing anything wrong. But my silence was part of the same cycle." She looked at me. Truly looked, not avoiding. "I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you sooner. I know you stayed quiet for years thinking that was how you kept the family together. But no one has the right to turn kindness into a condition they can exploit." Something softened in me. Not from pain, but because someone had finally said what I'd been waiting over a decade to hear. That acknowledgement doesn't come from gratitude. It comes from understanding. And today, Olivia gave me that. We talked for hours. Not about the drama. Not about who said what or who defended whom. We talked about what it was like to grow up in a family where roles were handed out like scripts. Who's the successful child? Who's the one to rescue? Who's the sacrificial one? I used to believe my role was fixed. Now I know I can leave the stage anytime I choose. Before leaving, Olivia turned to ask, "If Grandma ever asks why you don't come around anymore, what should I tell her?" I didn't need long to answer. I simply said, "Tell her I'm still here, I'm just not waiting for an invitation." After she left, I stood on the balcony, looking out over the red brick buildings in the evening light. I thought about every Christmas past, every meal I cooked and ate alone, every gift I signed from all of us because Mom said, "It'll feel warmer that way." Those memories no longer felt like weight. They were just evidence of someone who once loved and is now learning to love herself. I don't need them to call and apologize. I don't need a letter explaining everything. I don't need to go back. Because for the first time, I'm no longer standing outside, hoping to be let in. I've built myself a home, quiet enough that it doesn't need Christmas bells at the door. I opened the fridge, took out leftover pasta, poured a small glass of wine. And as I sat at the table with just one chair, I realized, sometimes, healing doesn't come from a gesture of forgiveness. It comes from the moment you no longer feel the need to be accepted in order to live according to your own worth. Lydia's story proves that sacrifice holds no value when it's treated as a default obligation. When family ties are buried beneath silence, exploitation, and neglect, walking away isn't betrayal. It's a brave act of reclaiming your self-worth. In real life, if you've carried your family on your back and still been treated as disposable, remember, you don't need an invitation to exist. You have the right to walk away, draw new boundaries, and build a life where everything you give is seen and valued. What do you think about Lydia's decision? Was she too harsh, or was she simply taking back what she deserved? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family and life.